there are a lot of trade candidates. And really, when you kind of look at everything, there's actually more trade candidates than I kind of thought. I feel like every offseason you go into it, you always feel like you got a good, like maybe, 4 or 5 guys, like a good handful, top guys. When you really look across the league, there's a lot of trade candidates, I feel like. Guys that are coming up on arbitration, guys that are, a year away from free agency, maybe even a couple of years away. Teams that are maybe going through retooling phases, rebuilding phases where, it seems there's just a lot of prime candidates to be, possibly traded this offseason. What do you think about that? Do you feel like there is a lot this offseason, or are we just kind of waiting for something to happen and we're just getting excited over here?
Well, one other dynamic, and I don't want to get too far in the weeds with this, but some of the teams kind of overspent last year, and so the free agents market, not only is it once you get past Otani, not that it isn't that great, but teams don't have as much money this year. Is the vibe I'm getting? Like, if some of them are struggling with the TV rights issue with the Bally Sports and the RSNs, and so they don't have as much revenue coming in, so they're going to be a little bit more budget conscious, or they spent a lot last off season. There was a bit of a feeding frenzy last season. So I just have this funny feeling that it's going to be more economical for them to trade for a guy who's not making as much, but has a lot of surplus value. So that means they're going to spend more from their farm capital rather than from their budget capital, if you will.
Yeah, it's and when you said TV revenue, all those dynamics. I mean, the first team that comes to mind are the San Diego Padres. I mean, I guess the word on the street is they had to take out some loans to help pay some people. I don't know what's going on. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. But real quick, John, I got to say, yes, I am a diehard for baseball trade values. And I'm not just saying this to, toot your horn or anything, but I got to say, I love the new site. I love all the changes to it. It's just so much smoother, in my opinion, and it's way more quick, and I just like all the new additions to it. How are you feeling about the updated website? How are you feeling like it's coming along, and any other changes coming up possibly? What are you thinking here?
Yeah, I'm feeling great. Thank you for mentioning that. When we relaunch something, you're always thinking, I'm nervous about it. Like, oh no, people are going to like it. Everybody seems to like it. I mean, granted, the old one had been around for 4 years and it was getting really slow because it was kind of on an old, slow platform, and this one is on a new, fast one. And so we sped everything up, and so it makes it a lot easier for users to interact with. And, we put, everything's clearer. Everybody seems to like the design, but we added a whole bunch of new features too. So, we're not just about trade values anymore, but we're also predicting free agent contracts and extension contracts. I shouldn't say predicting, because what you can do is you can toggle around with multiple years. And so if you think Otani's going to get 10 years instead of 12, you can see what that's worth, and vice versa. If you think Juan Soto is going to get a 10-year extension or an 8-year extension after this year, then you can play around with that. There's lots of new ways to play around with it, in addition to kind of the normal sort of trade value stuff that we've also sped up. We've also introduced this concept called a value matcher. So if you want to see kind of a range of outcomes, you don't have to like Juan Soto, we have a 22.9, right? But we don't know which team is going to go to. So before picking a team, you can just hit the value matcher button, and it'll match up, other players, give or take plus or minus 20% in that same range as kind of a lead piece for Soto. And you say, oh, maybe he can go to the Giants or the Mariners or wherever. And so you can speed up the process that way. There's a lot of new things like that. And thanks for sporting the shirt, because we're selling merch now too.
Yes.
So
yes. It's a very comfy shirt. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
No, I actually really like the value matcher, and I came up with a couple of trade videos in the last couple of weeks, and one trade that I put together, I actually did use the value matcher, one idea for Alex Verdugo, because the value is for him roughly around like $5 million or so. We'll get to him later on in the show. But that's a guy who I could see maybe, you trade him for some depth starting pitching, something like that. So I feel like when you're in that kind of range, I felt like, a value matcher actually came in handy for that. So I actually came up with a trade with the Padres to get some depth starting pitching. If they were to lose Juan Soto, well, maybe they could pivot to Verdugo or something like that. So the value matcher really came in handy right there. That to me is awesome to me. I really, it makes it a little bit more convenient because my brain is a potato, and sometimes I just need some ideas to come to me, and that's how maybe I can build some more ideas, right? So I like that it kind of helps me
Yeah.
piece together some trades. Maybe not exactly the way I would maybe do a trade, but at least it kind of can get me thinking a little bit more. So yeah, I think it's a
Yeah.
great addition. And I also just wanted to point out as well, really love the subscription options. I think it's amazing, honestly, when all the different options that you can get along, with getting either a general manager tier or the front office. How are you feeling about the subscriptions so far?
So far, going really well. I'm pleasantly surprised. Well, I shouldn't say pleasantly surprised, but we're getting a lot of new subscribers. It's good. A lot of the things that we offer in the subscription tiers are things that, like, whoa, nobody else is doing. Like, we're showing you like what the future holds, basically, what the future trade value. If you think it'd be smarter for the Padres to hold on to Soto and trade him at the deadline, you can see what the difference is. We have that. We have
Yeah.
the trade deadline numbers for end of July for every player that's eligible. We have extension numbers. We have a year by year breakdown where you can kind of follow the sort of the graphs year by year and see what their surplus value is at every step of the way. So that's a popular feature. And we also have the team rankings, so you can see like who has the most field value, who has the most surplus value, at which level, the majors or the minors, and part of that is who has the strongest farm system, who has the weakest farm system, broken down into the actual numbers. So we're the only ones that I know of doing this. Other outlets can do that type of thing with their own numbers, but we aggregate them. So we're the only ones who are doing sort of a cross section of all the numbers and saying who has the strongest farm, who has the weakest
Oh
farm,
yeah.
and I don't know anybody who's doing like who has the most surplus value, who has the most field value
Right.
involved. So you can see like how teams are constructed.
Of course, Fangraphs too. They have a lot of options over there. But when it comes to actual trades, looking at a deep dive into the values of players,
Yeah.
it's you guys got a great thing going here. So,
Thank you.
but everyone, go check it out. A whole ton of different options you can get with these different subscription options. But everyone is here, John. We're gonna talk a little trade action, and we got to dive into the big name, right? He's always the big name on the market, right? For the past 2 years now, it's Juan Soto. It's either at the deadline 2 years ago, or whatever, year and a half ago. This past deadline, his name came up, and of course, his name has to come up again. Juan Soto, 1 year away from free agency. And, he got off to the slow start last year. I remember we were talking about that earlier on in the season last year. But like we thought, he was going to get it together, put together another very good season, 35 home runs, a 410 on base, the 519 slugging, the 155 WRC plus, a 5.5 Fangraph WAR. In the end, Juan Soto still one of the best players in the game and still only 25 years old, most likely going to get a contract probably around the $450 million range. That sounds pretty fair to me. When it comes to a player like this, you've referred to him as a unicorn type of a player, which he is when you're putting up these kind of numbers, when he already has almost a 30 Fangraph WAR by the age of 25. You're working with something special there. So how are you feeling about Soto? Where, I guess you could really talk about the Padres in general right now because, I kind of touched on it before we got into everything. The Padres, they're looking to cut some payroll, according to reports. They had to take out some loans to help pay some guys that, a lot of that was because of the TV revenue and whatnot. So, but the main goal for them, according to the reports, is they are looking to slash some payroll. A lot of big contracts here. And with Soto, actually, Soto would be the highest paid player next year in his final year of arbitration. That's just how good that guy is. So right now, kind of, what are your thoughts on the Padres?
Yeah.
Sure, we'll talk about Soto, but what are you thinking about the Padres here? Like, do you think Soto is gone? Do you think that maybe they even looking to trade a couple other guys? What do you think?
Okay, so it all starts with the fact that their principal owner unfortunately just passed away last week. And so his old business partner has taken over the team. And we don't know anything about him in terms of baseball, like what his motivations are or anything. We knew that the old owner, Peter Seidler, wanted to go for it. Even though he probably didn't have enough money to, he still wanted to. He wanted to experience the championship in his lifetime. Sadly, he didn't get to. We don't know if the new owner is similarly motivated. It feels like, just from reading the tea leaves, that they do want to kind of cut the budget back, and maybe because they still have a lot of stars, they've still got Tatis and Machado and Bogarts. Like, well, it'd be silly for them to just rebuild, so they're going to try to thread the needle. So if they do trade Juan Soto, they'd want to use that option to replace him maybe not. You can't get obviously replace one side of one person, but maybe you get a Verdugo who's worth a couple of wins, and then you save some money and get a couple of pitchers, and you replace Snell and Hader that way. And so you can kind of cobble it together and say, okay, we're going to save some money and try to go for it again with the core that we have. I think that's where they're going. So I'm not totally convinced they're trading Soto this offseason because they may want to see how it goes. And then maybe if they're not in it, then they'll trade him at the deadline. Of course, as I just mentioned, we can show you the difference in the numbers. Right now, we have him at 22.9 at the deadline. Assuming the current run rate, he'd be worth about 7 or 8. So there's a difference there in terms of what they would get back. So the question there is, how serious do they want to go for it? Or is it worth hanging on to him for that reason or not? Because he can get you 5 wins versus 2 wins.
Right. And and when you think of Soto, I would think a team would want to trade for him if they feel like they could get him signed to an extension, right? I could see waiting until the deadline, waiting until that time, because at least you wouldn't have to, maybe you wouldn't have to break the bank, for him at that point. But with the market and everything, yeah, like I could see his value maybe being around kind of around the same because of the market. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like you could roughly see around the same when it comes to his value?
It wouldn't be as much. Because time is a big factor and people underestimate it. You basically lose out on 4 months, and that's a couple of wins that he would have contributed to your team if you had him on your team. So it really does make a difference. And we saw how in the overall standings, 1 or 2 wins could make the difference between getting into the playoffs or not. And it happened to the Padres, for example. Yeah. So it's not nothing,
Yeah.
It really is important. You have to have that player on your team. The other thing is, if you have him on your team for the whole year, you can also issue him a qualifying offer at the end of the year. He'll decline it, and you get a draft pick, depending on where you are in the spectrum of that.
That's a really good. That's a really good. Something that I don't think a lot of people are actually thinking about right there. Yeah, good call on that.
Yeah, but you have to have him for the whole year in order to issue that QO. Like if you trade him in the middle of the year, then all bets are off. But it's but people do tend to overestimate it because sometimes if you're a lower level team that trades a superstar, you'll get a draft pick that's sort of between the first and second round. It's worth about $4 million.
Yeah.
But if you're a more competitive team with a higher salary and so forth, it's going to be worth about $2 million. So it's not that big a deal, but it's not nothing.
Yeah. And when it comes to Soto, in my opinion, I think there's a few teams that could be a great fit for him. There's always a team that could use someone like Juan Soto. But when I'm thinking of a team that could really want to trade for him, I'm thinking of a team that would like to try and get him into a long-term extension. And the one team, and I've been saying this on my streams, are the Yankees, right? When you think of the Yankees going back for years and years, and I actually thought of another one today where think of all the times where they have come off an embarrassing season, fans aren't happy. Think of all those kind of moves that they've made, right? Go back to 2008, to the 2009 offseason, spending all that money that they did on Burnett, Sabathia, Teixeira, go back to when they got Tanaka, right? That was another one. Go back to 2004 when they were 1 win away from a World Series. Yes, the Red Sox had the best comeback in all of sports, but look at what, they were 1 win away from a World Series and they still made a splash in the offseason. Didn't really work out all that much, but they traded for Randy Johnson, right? That was like huge when that happened. Yeah. I remember when Randy Johnson went to the Yankees. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Randy freaking Johnson on the Yankees? I still remember that opening night start. He just blew the Red Sox away and it ended up not being all that great for the Yankees, but still, it was a monumental move. So when I think of the Yankees over the years, are they those same Yankees? I don't know. Like, what do you think when it comes to teams? Like, do you think the Yankees would have the best shot, especially when it comes to signing him maybe long term?
So here, the money is a big factor here. Soto is projected to make $33 million in arbitration this year. $33 million. I mean, that's market rate for a really good hitter on their own. I mean, Trout's making $36 million. There's not, and granted, it's only 1 year. So we're tacking on surplus value of 22.9. So we're basically saying when we show that 22.9 number, we're saying that's what he's worth on top of the 33 million that you have to pay as part of the acquisition. So that's a total of 56 million in total capital outlay. Has anybody ever in history paid that much for one season of one player? And the answer is no. So it's already sort of a high bar to clear. You have to clear it with the ability to pay that $33 million salary and the ability to give significant capital on top of that. And
Yeah.
so there aren't that many teams that can do that, frankly, or that motivated to do that. The Yankees seem to be one of them. I'm not going to put anything past the Giants because
Yeah.
the Giants need a really big fish. They've been wallowing in mediocrity. They, Farhan Zaidi knows it. He's getting pressure from his owners. Do something big. So he's like,
Yeah.
okay, I got to do something big. so they're going to do something big. I don't know what yet, but I'm not going to count them out of anything.
Yeah, I mean the Giants are one team that I've thought about too. I just think of the in division thing. Like, would Preller
Yeah,
actually
true.
deal him? Especially a player of that magnitude, right?
Yeah.
Where if you trade him to the Giants, he ends up liking it, and then he stays there, and now you got to play Juan Soto for the next 10 years, right? And it's
Yeah.
like, do you want to do that if you're the Padres? He's a great fit for the Giants. I just wonder if they would do it. To me, the prime team is the Yankees. It's just one of those things. I keep saying this on my streams. I know people are going to roll their eyes, but it's kind of one of those things. Yeah, say what you will about the Yankees the last couple of years. They flopped last year, got rolled over by the Astros in the playoffs, but it's still the Yankees at the end of the day. It's still pinstripes at the end of the day. It's, legendary, right? Soto, when I think of a player like Juan Soto, if he stays on this track, he's going to go down as one of the best players of all time. That's a Yankee. Like, I know this Yankee team. I know this franchise, and it's Soto to me. He's a Yankee, and I don't know. I mean, I would love. I'd love to be a Red
It's
Sox.
hard. That's an easy one to predict because they have all the pieces. They have the money to pay him. They've got enough prospects to give back, and they've got that whole sort of vibe going on. And they need him. They need a left fielder.
Yeah,
and they're highly motivated to kind of improve their team this year. So after last year. So yeah, they check all the boxes, frankly. One other team that I'm going to say this, but I don't have a whole lot of confidence in is the Braves because the Braves also need a left fielder. That's like the one hole in their amazing lineup that is sort of like, do we put Von Grissom there? I don't know. So like that would make them a super team. Can you imagine that lineup with them? But they're not huge spenders in salary terms, so that's why I'm pulling back from that a little bit. I just sort of like the idea of it, just because you can fill that left field hole.
I wonder, you're talking about the salary with the Braves. I guess the reports were saying they were going after Nola pretty hard, but Soto's not a pitcher, so I don't know if they would.
And they need pitching,
right? So
it
would be interesting. I mean, that lineup would be insane. They would sell so many tickets next year; it would be crazy. But we all, we're looking at Juan Soto as the top dog when it comes to the trade candidates. But the Padres, they could have a couple others as well. If we're looking at the payroll for the Padres, they have a couple of guys that are coming closer to free agency. Ha-Seong Kim had a really good year last year. You have the mutual option for 25. Those tend not to get exercised very often. So you could see Kim as having just maybe one more year left on that. Maybe you could, buy out that last year or whatever it is when you work something out with the team, if you were to trade him. So he's definitely a candidate. Trent Grisham, the bat hasn't really been amazing, but he can still play some decent defense out there. He's got 2 more years under control. Are there any other players on the Padres?
I would say a lot of people are speculating that the Padres, if they're looking to save money, would attach Jake Cronenworth to any sort of Soto deal because he's actually, underwater. They made a mistake, I think, by extending him, and he's been kind of declining steadily since his big year a couple of years ago. And now he's not. He had a bad year this past year, and so he's a little underwater. And so they could save more money and future obligations by attaching him to Soto, and they would get less in return, obviously. But they'd also need a first baseman because Kim's basically got second base. Assuming they keep Kim, and I think they will, because I think they want to give it one more shot because. What are they doing with Bogarts and Machado and these guys that are in their prime still? I think they've still got one more run in them if they can kind of piece it together just the right way.
Well, that's the one thing. The Padres, they're a talented team. They just didn't have it together last year. I mean, if you could think back to the beginning of the year, they didn't have Musgrove, right? So he missed that first month. It felt like their rotation just never got themselves stabilized at all during the year. They had a good run at the end of the season, but it just wasn't enough. I do think they want to compete, and even if they trade Soto, I still think they would look to get back some pieces that can help them now and some prospects, right? You can definitely pull off a package like that. So we'll just have to wait and see. But one name, he just keeps coming up here, John. I don't think they move him. But his name keeps coming up, and that is Fernando Tatis Jr. Not in reports necessarily, but there has maybe been some stuff out there where people say, "Oh, could he be a trade candidate?" I don't think so. What do you think? Do you think they even look into it?
That would solve a lot of problems if they did. Well, he's not being paid that much, but he's got a super team-friendly contract. He's got like 12 years left on that thing, and he's still young, and his best years are ahead of him. And he proved this year it wasn't quite as great as he prior to the suspension, but it was good. It was good enough to say, yeah, he's a good player. And they also moved him from short to right, and he actually did very well in right field. So he's a complete player, and you could see him, doing an Acuna in a couple of years, winning an MVP. So, we have his value well over 100, I think, last time I looked. So they would get a whole bunch back for him. And that's one way to kind of, kill a bunch of birds with one stone there. Yeah.
Goodness gracious. You would get that's close to the value of Juan Soto when he got traded to the Nationals a couple of years ago. That's right around that.
Yeah.
So that would be the similar trade. Obviously, it's a little different here because he has the long-term contract. So we'll have to keep an eye out for the Padres. I do personally think they are still going to be a competitive team next year. I also think they're just trying to do a little bit of both, right? They're trying to maneuver with their way around with the payroll right now, but still put a competitive team out on the field. I think there's a lot of people out there that think they're going to just completely just get rid of everyone. They're going to have a fire sale. No, I don't think that's going to happen. So, but
there's a lot of those guys are just locked in, so they can't.
Yeah. So let's move on here. I'm sure people are just wanting to see a Juan Soto trade instead of just talking about it all the time. But we do have a couple other candidates on the market as well. And we got a guy by the name of Corbin Burnes. I would probably say he's the top pitcher on the market. With Burnes, his situation is interesting. His numbers have slightly dipped over the last couple of years, not to horrible extreme levels, right? He still has really solid numbers, but you do look at the ERA, the FIP, xFIP, they have slightly trickled up a little bit. He's still very good though, still one of the top pitchers in the game. And then there's also another thing with Corbin Burnes. He is only 1 year away from free agency. So when it comes to his value, what are you seeing here with Burnes? Do you think he's a slam dunk trade candidate? Do you think there's a chance Milwaukee holds on to him until the deadline?
No.
What are your thoughts on Burnes?
No, I think he's a better bet to be traded than Soto or just about anybody. I mean, there was an interview with him that I happened to see where the interviewer asked him, so have you talked about an extension with the Brewers? He's like, no, we both kind of know that's not happening. In so many words, he basically said, no, I'm out of here in a year. And so then why bother, And also they just lost counsel, and you just get the funny feeling that it's time for them to rebuild, right? And he's got the most value of the candidates on their team. He's only got a year of control left. We're looking at a market that, even though there's a lot of pitchers, there's not a lot of elite pitchers on the market.
Right.
A lot of teams that need starting pitching, like at the front of their rotation, he would slot right into that. So I really do think he's good to go. We have his surplus value at $32 million, so they'll get a decent package for. I mean, it's like a no-brainer from Milwaukee's point of view. It's time to rebuild. Here's your best chip to get some good stuff back. So I really think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I do too. When you especially obviously Counsell heading to the Cubs, it feels like there's a shift going on a little bit. I think Counsell, a part of his decision, I think he won't say it out loud, but I think he saw the writing on the wall a little bit. I think he saw some of these top players. They're reaching their end. They're not going to have Burnes. They are going to have to go through a couple of years. And he saw greener pastures, right? He saw the Cubs, obviously the money. So he won't say it out loud, but the Brewers, sure, they are going to be keeping Freddie Peralta here for the next couple of years, but it hurts to lose someone like Corbin Burnes, and especially when there are teams out there that are starving for pitching, especially top of the rotation kind of pitchers. Now, I would love for my Red Sox to get him. I would. I wonder if I think the Red Sox, if the right deal was there, I think they could pull the trigger on it. The one thing that holds me back is the 1 year
Yeah,
um, until free agency. I have this gut feeling that the Red Sox would like to have some pitchers that are under more control,
yeah,
whereas, and this is my opinion, whereas a team like the Dodgers, I think they wouldn't be afraid of that. I think they would be like, yep, okay, 1 year, all right, whatever. We need a top guy for our rotation. We're trying to compete here, and we have the money. We can maybe work out an extension. He is a California guy, so I could see a team like the Dodgers really pulling the trigger
hmm
on someone like Corbin Burns. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the Braves could somehow work something out if they really wanted to get it done. I don't know. They seem to, I would think, want to go after guys that they can lock up to those longer extensions. Like the Sean Murphy trade was an
yeah,
example. So I don't know. When you kind of think of some teams, what
yeah.
do you think? Where do you think he would be a good fit when you look at just the value, when you look at likelihood of maybe staying with the team long term, teams that are comfortable with bringing him in, even if it is just for 1 year? Where do you think? What teams do you think would be good
I,
fits?
I do agree with you on the Dodgers because they've got so much young pitching talent, and the Brewers are heavy in position player prospects and young players. They got a bunch of young outfielders, for example, and so I think they'll want pitching back.
Yeah,
Also, because they just lost Woodruff, sadly, so
yeah,
they're down to not much. So they're going to want to restock their and that's what they were kind of built on. They had that sort of core of Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta go in there, and that kept them afloat quite a bit, even with bad offenses. So I think that's kind of their MO. So they're going to want to replace that pitcher with a younger pitcher or two, and the Dodgers have that in spades. So I think that's a natural fit. One team that I don't know if anybody's talked about is the Rangers.
mm,
Obviously, they just won the World Series, but largely on the back of Jordan Montgomery, who is now a free agent, so they lost him. DeGrom's still out. They're still kind of patchworking a rotation together, and I think they could use a solid guy like Burns, and they don't mind spending the money long term on him, and they've got plenty of prospects that are blocked, frankly,
yeah,
so by these established guys. So I think there's you can easily see a deal there.
yeah.
So those are two.
Maybe work a package, maybe around like someone like Owen White, maybe like a Foscue,
Yeah,
something
exactly.
like that. I think the Rangers can definitely get something done. Oh, could you imagine a rotation if they were to hang on to Burns? When DeGrom comes back, Burns. I mean, my goodness,
Yeah,
Evaldi. I mean,
yeah.
maybe who knows? Go out and maybe get another guy. Maybe Evaldi ends up being like your four. I mean, my goodness, Burns and DeGrom healthy. Oh, that is nasty. But yeah, Burns. That's an exciting one to look out for. I actually had a really interesting suggestion, and I wanted to bring this up to you. I just remembered it literally like 5 seconds ago from one of our longtime subscribers, Conman752. I don't know if he's here in the chat, but he actually came up with an idea. He sent a super chat one night. Could you maybe package Burns and Williams together into one package? I
Yeah.
thought that was an interesting idea. I always think it's better to trade two high value players separately. But do you think that could be a possibility?
I do. I do. Williams' control is dwindling, and so if they're going to rebuild, then you might want to think about not just a guy with 1 year of control, but a guy with 2 or 3 years of control as well, maybe on the table. Peralta, I think, has 4 or 5 still left, so he's probably staying put. But Williams, I could see. And also the thing is, if you're not going to compete, what are you doing with a closer? Like
Yeah,
that's kind of a no brainer, right? It's kind of a waste of a space. Like
yeah,
get some value out of that. Build the other parts of your team. You can always get a closer later. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, if you package them together, the other thing is that obviously that runs up the value numbers quite a bit. You're into like 50s and 60s, and so you can get like a high quality lead piece, like a top 50 prospect at least with a couple other pieces in that package. There you go.
yep. And Williams, he has a good amount of control. He's got 24 and 25.
Yeah.
So, however, his name hasn't really come up in any reports. The name that has come up with Burns in connection with the Dodgers is Willy Adames. That
Mm-hmm.
seems to be maybe a more digestible package, right? Where Williams, that's a lot of value thrown on top of Corbin Burns. But when it comes to Adames, you're looking at a median value of right around 10 million, 9.5 for the surplus. That seems like that could be a decent package, especially for a team like the Dodgers, where they could add, another middle infielder. They could make some room there. What do you think about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, I mean, you only got him for 1 year, and he's coming off a little bit of a down year. He was actually a little bit below average at the plate. He's got a good glove, but if you look at his track record, he's not like a superstar hitter.
Right.
He's okay, he's a good guy, good clubhouse guy, good defender, average hitter. So it's not going to break the bank in terms of capital. He's only got 1 year left, and he's getting pricey, so that's why he's at a 9.5 or whatever.
Yeah.
So but so then it's more about the fit. So then you have to ask yourself, well, what are the Dodgers doing with him? Because they've got Gavin Lux coming back. Actually, don't forget about him
Yeah.
because he was out all year. I know Rojas was traded for it. He's at the end of his career, and he's just a utility guy at this point, so he's not going to block anything. So anyway, the question there is, what do they do with Lux? They had him pegged as their starting shortstop. He's going to be back this time. So the question is Adames better than Lux? I don't know if you can make that case. I mean, Lux had a good year before he got injured. That's why they gave him the job. So I don't know. That's something to think about. I don't know if you want to give up capital just to block a guy that you already have.
So I'll ask you this. So if you are a team out there looking to add Corbin Burnes, but the Brewers, they said to you, all right, we'll do a deal for Burnes, but you're going to have to take either Williams or Adames. Let's say you need both, right? If you were to pick one, who would you rather have with Burnes?
I'd much rather have Williams. I mean, he's got, you
So
can
good.
win a World Series with a guy like that at the back end of your rotation, and back into your bullpen, and with Burnes at the front of your rotation. That is a winning combination. The question is, do you have the capital to give up to get both of them on one deal? And the Dodgers do, and
Dodgers
some
could definitely do it.
Dodgers could do it. The Rangers could do it. They've got a strong farm. So the Rays could do it, but they're not going to do that for 1 year Burnes.
Yeah.
But they've always got a strong farm. So I'm
fun.
not going to. Yeah,
we had our hopes for Ohtani, but maybe not so much for Burnes. All right, let's move on here. One guy that has been in the news with the Dodgers. Of course, the Dodgers are all over the trade market. I mean, just look at all the prospects they got. But one guy they have been connected to this past weekend was Dylan Cease. Now, nothing substantial, concrete has really come together, and there's no reports out there suggesting it, but they were telling us, Bob Nightingale, saying that they were at least talking about it. All right. Go back to the trade deadline, right? This actually came up at the trade deadline. I'm not surprised that this didn't happen at the deadline with Cease and the Dodgers, because with Cease, you're looking at a pretty high value for him.
Yeah.
We're looking at right around that $45 million range, maybe as low as 35. So I'm not surprised the deal didn't come together at the deadline, because you're looking at a lot of prospects there. So they ended up going for the Lance Lynn, right? So, and he signed with the Cardinals today. The Cardinals, they made their splash, right? They're looking for 3-star starting pitchers. Well, they got one in Lance Lynn. Anyway, I digress. But who knows? Maybe Dylan Cease could be that guy. Anyway, but not surprised that, to see nothing came together at the deadline. And I said, wait till the offseason. I guarantee this will come up again, and here we are. So Dylan Cease. Now, the one problem with Dylan Cease, I see a lot of criticism, and I was actually talking about the Cease rumors last night. I had a lot of people in the chat. People think I'm not looking at the chat, and I'm always looking at the chat. But they were saying, wow, why would anyone want Cease? Look at the ERA, look at the numbers. They've been lowering. His strikeouts have been lowering. His walks have been going up a little bit. You can even see the velocity has gone down. So I guess my personal question is, I do agree, right? With the White Sox defense did not help him out last year. His FIP was still pretty healthy, right around a 3.8, I believe a 3.78 to be exact. I would still like to have Cease on my team, but do you think those lower projections, for him, right now Zips is projecting him to have a FIP in the 4s for next year. Do you feel like we could end up seeing maybe something in the lower range for a Dylan Cease? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, that's fine. But he does have a lot of positives. I can see the negatives as well, but the positives are, first of all, he's got 2 years of control. He's only 27, so you're coming up on his age 29 year. If he were 34, 35, yes, he'd be in decline. But the problem is he's not. He's still in his prime. And so you have to sort of look at that 2023 and think, is that an anomaly or is it a sign of decline? And, at that age, typically, you don't decline that much. So prior to this, he had 4.4 F4 and 4.5 F4. So that's a strong track record. and combined with the youth, the control, the cheapness, he's I won't go so far as to call him an ace, but a lot of teams will value that. And so yes, I could see him going for. We have him at 44. I could see him going for 30, in the 30s. Um, but he's better than. I think he's better than Nola, a little bit better than Nola in terms of his peripherals. If you look at
Yes,
his stat
I mean,
test,
yeah, I think stuff
yeah,
wise, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
and Nola got offers higher than the 172 million he just signed for. So, there's going to be a lot of teams looking for that sort of that type of pitcher who is still a high quality pitcher, still young and still with control, is still going to cost you quite a bit.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really good comparison there. I think I guarantee a lot of, especially Philly fans, I'm surprised they're not going crazy right now in the chat over that statement. But I do think there are some similarities there with Aaron Nola. I mean, when you look at the numbers, they're both workhorses, right? They both
Yeah,
had
right.
similar. I think Nola had a slightly lower ERA last year, but I think Nola had the higher FIP last year. I
Yeah.
think there's a lot of similarities between Dylan Cease and Aaron Nola. Now, will the Phillies be able to get Nola back on track for next year to what he was doing prior? Let's see. But I think that's actually a pretty good comp. Guarantee that's going to make some people grumpy, but whatever. Hey, that's entertainment
I
for you.
don't get me wrong. I love Nola. He's so
Yeah,
reliable, and I think he's underrated because he keeps you in the
I think
game
so
and
too.
he just goes out there every 5 days. But so does Cease. He's made 33 starts, and that's a large part of his WAR value. And a lot of in this day and age, when starting pitchers are getting injured or they're not lasting past the fifth inning or whatever, there's a lot to be said for that.
Right. And, you could also look, mentally, like, I mean, as well, like, think of yourself, Cease on the mound. He's going out there and competing every day, but that White Sox team was so bad last
Yeah,
year. And it's like, God, I would like to put him on a competitive team and see what happens there and put him on a
yeah,
team with better defense as well, that could work better behind him. Because if you look here, the ERA was a 4.58, but look at the BABIP, a 330 BABIP. That's extremely high.
yeah,
And then you look at the FIP, a 3.72. Sierra was around that range, I believe, in the low fours, high threes. Can't remember exactly, but I think
yeah,
Dylan Cease is a really good piece to add. But I think people, they look at this value, they're like, "Wow, that's just too much. That's too much." I disagree. I think what you said. I think people need to kind of start focusing on the fact innings themselves are valuable, right? If you're a team, Major League Baseball team, it is really hard to get 700, 750, 800 innings, good
yeah,
innings from your rotation, right?
yeah,
And Cease is going to give you that. And I think, like you said, I think it's a very underrated aspect when it comes to starting pitchers. They're going to give you at least decent innings, right? Because, hey, we saw what happened with the Cardinals last year. Look what happened there,
yeah.
right?
Right.
No innings. So they had no quality innings. No matter how good their offense was, good bats, you need those innings, right? And
Yeah,
Cease is going to bring you, in my opinion, above average innings. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and
But,
and if he goes to the Dodgers, and I think we talked about this a couple of years ago. At one point in the offseason, they had like 7 starters, and we thought, why do you have 7 starters, Dodgers? And then it turns out they needed all of them, and then so
yeah.
that because a bunch of them got injured and whatever. Walker Buehler went down, and all sorts of things happened. So like, okay, you do need 7 starters. Actually, they were right, So, and they're not even close to 7 now. So they're going to pay for somebody who's good, who can give you those quality innings over a long period of time.
Oh, yeah. And when it comes to teams, do you think he lands with the Dodgers? Or, I mean, it's easy to say the Dodgers, but do you feel like
It
maybe
is.
another team could hop into this?
Well, I do think the Braves are a candidate here.
Mm,
They don't have the strong farm, but they've shown they can kind of piece it together, and they can dangle Grissom, for example, as another one. They could put it together with a couple of their young pitchers in Grissom, and sort of make it work. Um, maybe the Cardinals because they desperately need pitching. Now again, that's well, no, ALN on that front, but they could use the pitching, and I do think they have a lot of young, not only prospects but young major leaguers. Were sort of, okay, what do you do with Nolan Gorman, and what do you do with all these guys that you have? So, I think there's something there.
yeah. And pulling up the Braves, I put together just a little, like a starting point where maybe you could do like AJ Smith,
Yeah,
Scheuer, and then Grissom. You could start there.
Yeah.
I think the Braves could definitely put something together. They do have some younger pitchers, maybe Elder. You could start there. It seems like
Yeah.
the White Sox right now, it seems like what their game plan is they're just trying to bring in any kind of pitchers they can, and it's like they're almost throwing stuff against the wall, right? And they're just gonna see what
Yeah,
sticks.
totally.
It kind of
Yeah.
just feels like that. It feels like they don't really even have any kind of like an actual game plan. They're just kind of getting everything they can, right? I think when Chris Getz, I think
Yeah.
when Chris Getz, he said when he was getting interviewed at the general manager meetings, he basically said, "Hey, if we can turn players, if we can multiply players, hey, we'll look into it." And it's literally what he's doing, right? You just
Yeah.
saw it with Bummer, like he's getting any players he can at this point. So I wonder,
Maybe he gets something out of Soroka. Maybe he gets something out of Jared Schuster. He's throwing
yeah,
spaghetti on the wall.
yeah. I mean, and if you could get, Shaver and Grissom, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's very possible. So who knows? But I think the Cardinals are a good bet. I had one comment. I actually did a trade predictions video. I did come up with Cease to the Cardinals. I don't know.
Okay.
I try giving every bit of leeway I can for the Cardinals to do something, and then they go get Lance Lynn. I don't know. I would like to think that they would really go after Cease. But, I had some people push back on it saying, why would the Cardinals, after getting in all this pitching, why would they, be trading young pitching prospects to, bring in Cease? I'm like, well, he's under control. He's very good. You know what he's going to give you. It's still in Cease at the end of the day. Do you think the Cardinals, after bringing in a ton of prospects, especially a lot of them being pitching prospects, could you see them maybe being okay with still parting with prospects and maybe getting a deal done or pitching
I think it's
prospects?
more likely that they trade from a lot of position players because look, the White Sox need anything.
Yeah.
They're they're starting over, right?
Yeah.
So
Feels like it.
they could use a Nolan Gorman, they could use a Burleson or a Donovan, or they need something, right?
Yeah.
To kind of they need position players in, so it doesn't have to be a starting pitching. So yeah, I could see it. I could also see the Orioles, by the way, who could use a little bit more of an established starter on the front end of their rotation.
Yeah.
And they've got so many prospects, they don't know what to do with them.
Well, the Orioles just make so much sense for everything, and then they just don't do anything. It's
time. It's time. They need to start consolidating some of that prospect value.
Oh, yeah. I agree. Well, let's get to a name real quick. We haven't heard this name all that much, but it's going to come up at some point, and that's Shane Bieber. Shane Bieber, he's had his injuries the last couple of years, definitely up and down. A couple of years ago, had over 30 starts. But then last year, the numbers necessarily weren't bad, but you have seen that velocity come down a little bit. Only 21 starts last year. Still did finish with a 3.87 FIP. Shane Bieber, at the end of the day, that's a decent guy to have in your rotation. Do you think, the Guardians are a similar organization like the Brewers where they don't ever really rebuild? They always try to retool, if anything, and they always try to put the best possible team on the field, especially in that division. It always seems like that division is up for grabs every single year. So what are you thinking here with the Guardians? Because the Guardians, we did see them get Jose Ramirez signed to the extension. So it seems like when comparing it to Burns and the Brewers, maybe they could do something with Bieber, some kind of an extension. But what are your feelings on Bieber right now?
Good story. Too many red flags.
Yeah.
The elbow is a big red flag right now, and that was towards the end of the season. And they brought him back for a couple of starts just to kind of show him off a little bit because I think they wanted to say, "Hey, yeah, he's okay." I don't think anybody's buying that. He's not okay. I think there's still a big concern about the elbow.
Yeah.
And usually you see indicators prior to that, which is like the velocity is down. That's the number one indicator of, there's a problem here. And so, and if you look at his StatCast page, his SWOT page, there's some red there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm sorry. There's some blue. That's the
Blues.
bad.
Yes.
Blues. Yeah. That's. There's a lot of blues.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things went wrong. He was getting a hard hit. The ex-Woba went up quite a bit. Things that you don't want to see. And so, yes, you got to admire the track record, but I think teams won't give up a lot because I think they're afraid of that elbow and afraid of that decline pattern.
Yeah. That's one thing I've been kind of thinking about it. You could always see something happen, But I wonder if teams maybe want to take like a wait and see approach.
Yeah.
Maybe kind of see how does he look in the season, and then
Right.
maybe deadline. Maybe that can
Right.
come up because I can also see the Guardians. They have said they plan on Bieber being in their rotation next year. Of course, they're going to say stuff like that, leverage.
Sure.
But I actually could see that, right? I could actually see them being serious about that because it could make some sense to just hang on to him. Like you said, there's a lot of red flags. Let's see how he looks in the first half of the year. Ends up really setting himself up to get himself, bring the Guardians back a nice package. And who knows where they are in the division next year? Who
So
knows?
yeah, that's the other consideration. The Twins actually publicly said they're cutting budget,
Yeah.
and we're talking the AL Central here, right? It's usually the Twins and the Guardians, and because Kansas City's nowhere close. White Sox are giving up; they've already thrown in the towel, and the Tigers are kind of a ways away. So it's still Twins and Guardians to win that division. It's the worst division in baseball, right? So, and the Guardians just indicated something by trading for Scott Barlow, who only has 1 year of control and is a more expensive reliever than the guy they gave up. Normally, it's the other way around, right? Normally, they trade short control for long control. This time they did the opposite. So that got to make you wonder: are they sniffing an opportunity here to kind of say, "Hey, it's totally up for grabs, and we've got enough pitching, and why not go for it?" So
Yeah.
I'm not sure they would trade Bieber. I think it's more likely and given the market sort of, I think, evaluation of Bieber's red flags, they might just say, "Okay, let's hold on to him, see what we got, and and maybe try to win the division."
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So we'll have to see what happens there. And another thing with Bieber too, it's not like he's going to bring back like a Corbin Burns kind of a package.
No.
I mean, you're looking at around $6 million,
Yeah.
even as low as 4.5. So it's not like he's going to bring you back like anything great. So it could end up being more valuable to hang on to him, at least for now.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the error bars, it's really about the error bars here because either he's going down with Tommy John, which I think is a strong possibility, or maybe he returns to form from when he was a couple of years ago when he was great. But usually that's not the pattern here. He's getting older. You see all the sort of red flags, and I think that's what's scaring teams away is that big error bar. Like, I don't want to take the risk that he's going to go down with Tommy John, and then we got nothing. So that's why they're not going to give up a whole lot. And by the way, he's in the last year of arbitration, and his salary is not cheap, and you've only got 1 year control. So, like, what are you getting?
Right. We'll have to see. I actually do want to just backtrack just a second because I did forget to mention this player because I had a comment here from Derek Bivens in the chat. He's come up with a blockbuster trade here. Gorman, Hens, Segesi, and Scott for Luis Robert and Cease. He said that would feed families. I forgot to mention Luis Robert. People don't want to give up on trading him, or him being a trade candidate. We've been hearing about Robert being a trade candidate now for a while. Right. And I don't know, like when you're looking at his value, it is pretty high, right? If you're looking at him, you're at 85 million. Do you think, listen, if Chris Getz is serious about trying to multiply players, well, there you go.
Yeah.
That's going to give you at least 4 players right there. 4 good players.
Yeah. So and that's up to him, obviously. But he's also said that's the kind of guy you build around, and I don't disagree because he's a young superstar on a cheap contract with 5 years of control. So like, how can you not love that? And that's what the whole industry salivates over, right?
Yep.
There's a guy like that. So you would get a ton for him, and you would be able to restock your lineup. Now you lose your star, but you'd start over with filling a bunch of holes with it. So I can see the case for it. I think it's a bit of a stretch, but I can see the case for it.
He's got. He has the 2 club options, but next year it's crazy. He's only making $12.5 million next year, and then 15 and 25. It makes sense why teams would salivate over that, even with the injury history. This guy is really good. So I wonder, man, if he could end up going anywhere. Hey, you had him for a full healthy season last year. I know, obviously, you got to build a team. I know that. But you didn't really get very far with him. And in his best season that he's had, I don't know. I wouldn't count it out. I was very firmly no on it last year during the season. But now I'm a little more open to it. I wonder. The value seems a little high for me right now. Anytime I see a value that high, unless Soto was a little different, but I don't know. When I see that value, that's just so high for me. I'll probably go, if you were to give a percent, Luis Robert being traded, what do you think?
I'd say it's 2080.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I think they keep him, and I think another strong season, and I think he's got it in him because he still hasn't hit his prime yet. He's what 25 or so.
yeah,
So like
yeah.
usually they peak at 27. So he's yeah. I mean, he puts together a 5 or 6 war season here, then that is going to keep going up even higher. So
Yeah, I'll
um,
go there too. I'll go 20%. I think anytime if the right deal comes along and if you're in that state where you are listening, it's always possible. So,
yeah.
let's move on here. Let's go to a couple other guys and one thing I've noticed about this market, it's very pitching heavy, right? A lot of pitchers on this trade market. And, we're talking about injuries with Shane Bieber. Well, one guy who's had a little Tommy John before, but did look pretty good last year was Tyler Glasnow. Unfortunately, came up short in the wild card round against the World Series champion Rangers. But Tyler Glasnow, he's an interesting one to me because when he is healthy and he's on, this guy is one of the better pitchers in the game. He's just always a question mark to me. There's always something durability wise with him. And when you look at the value, and I think, because we just look at Corbin Burns, right? You got a median
Mm-hmm.
value in the 30s. But when you look at Tyler Glasnow, I mean, you look at these kind of numbers, you're like, wow, these are really good numbers. You look at the strikeouts, 12 strikeouts per 9, but then you see the 13 million. And the reason, I believe, you are the master of this, I think it is the injury history. So why don't we see a value like Corbin Burns here?
So first of all, got 1 year of control. He's making $25 million.
Mm,
So $25 million is not cheap, right? So
that is, yeah.
that's what that's the AV of NOLA there, and there will be many others that surpass that. But 25 million is not cheap. Now, let me ask you this: look at his Fangraphs page and tell me when was the last time he pitched more than 120 innings. And by the way, a starter, and we talked about this with Cease, starter you want at least 150, if not more. The
Well,
answer is
if
last
we
year was
count
the
this
only time
past
he did
season,
it.
he did pitch, 3 innings in the playoffs, 4, so he did break
Okay, all
120
right,
this
but
year.
he's not pitching. I know Steamer has him at 164. He's never pitched that in his life.
I
In
know.
his life, he's
Yeah.
never gone above 120 in his life, and he has. It's not just like coming back from Tommy John. He had a lat injury last year, which is always like an indicator that something's wrong with his mechanics. Like he's just not durable. I mean, his WAR numbers reflect that too. They're 2.6, 2.3 in his best years because he just doesn't pitch that much. So you're not paying for a 150 or 160 innings. You're paying for 120 innings. Yes, those are good innings, but that's what you're getting. And so he's costing you 25 million in salary. So there's not that much surplus on top of that, is what we're saying.
Yeah. Another thing with Glasnow, it's still, I don't want to say it boggles my mind, but when I look at his age, he's not old, but I'm like, really? He's 30? I just always think Glasnow is like a 24-year-old kid just gunning fastballs down the strike zone,
Yeah.
but no, he is starting. He's in his 30 age, his 30 years now. And like you said, he has never pitched. Well, besides the wild card round this year, getting him over the 120, he has never gone over it. And so he's one of those guys to me where, yes, you would love to add the stuff, as like a 3 in your. For me personally, if I had a chance to get him as my number 3 guy, I'm putting him behind 2 guys that I'm not saying the Phillies would be who knows, maybe the Phillies could go get him. Like if I had Wheeler Nola in my rotation, like I'm comfortable with that at my 1-2 durability wise. I would be okay with having Glasnow as like my 3, not because of the numbers, right? When he's
Yeah.
healthy, he's great. I just worry about the durability with him, all right? So
Yeah.
I don't want him
Yeah.
as my number 1 guy, right? I can't count on him as my number 1 guy, but even as my number 2. Stuff wise, yes, if he's pitching 30 starts a year, easily, but he can't get to those numbers. So I would be okay with this for a 3. So when you think of teams, what are some teams out there? For me, I do think a team like the Braves would be a good fit. I think a
Yeah.
team like the Cubs, you got Steele at the top there. Who
Yeah.
knows? Maybe they could add someone else. But I think Glasnow could be a good fit for a team like the Braves or a team like the Cubs. What do you think?
So it has to have it. So he's easier to get in terms of prospect capital, right? Because he's not going to cost you that much in those terms. He's going to cost you more in terms of salary. But as long as teams out there have enough to cover that 25 million and one player who's a little bit iffy, that's fine. I think the Cubs is a good call. I think the Braves is a good call, because the Braves don't have a strong farm, so they can afford the 25. So yeah, I can see both of those. Probably should have mentioned the Cubs as a Soto contender as well, by the way, because I think they're itching to spend on somebody.
Yep.
So yeah, I think the Cubs are going to be active. Not sure I'm seeing a fit for the Cardinals because I'm not sure they're a one and done kind of team with a guy like this. I think they like longer control, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I could be wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. We'll have to see. But I do think Glasnow, there was a report from Morosi saying most likely he will, and Paston has said it too, that most likely he will get moved. They are shopping him. It does feel like you're going to have to wait for some of these other pictures to come off the board first, and then you could turn your attention to someone like Glasnow. So we'll have to wait and see on that. And we got one more big name. Now, I think there's a very slim chance Logan Gilbert ends up being moved. However, the Mariners are in an interesting situation where they have a ton of pitching. They got a lot of pitching, definitely a surplus. And one name that seems to just keep appearing in rumors here and there is Logan Gilbert. We saw it was more speculation, but the Mariners could be in the market for Yamamoto, where when they were asking him about the possibility of signing Yamamoto, he kind of gave a smile, right? Didn't really give off any sort of concrete answers, which he can't really. But once he gave that answer, people were speculating, could maybe they be in the market for Yamamoto here? And if they did sign Yamamoto, that could maybe make someone, which I think is crazy, like Logan Gilbert expendable. Or if not Gilbert, maybe someone like Bryce Miller or Brian Wu. What are your feelings on the Mariners right now? Do you think there is, with a chance with Gilbert? Remember his name came up during the season last year with the Cardinals. What do you think? If you were playing GM as the Mariners right now, where would your head be when it comes to?
So first of all, I never put much stock into those rumors. I think sometimes everybody talks to everybody about everything, right? And they're all texting each other and going, what about this? What about that? And once in a while, something leaks where, hey, I heard the Cardinals were talking about, and I don't know. It didn't seem to have much legs to that story. But what I do agree with is they've got kind of an overabundance of starting pitching. So I do think, and they could probably use a little bit more help on the offensive side, because their lineup is kind of a little bit top heavy. They got Julio at the top, but then they've got some guys who haven't really delivered, like Kelenic and France had a down year, and Eugenio Suarez is getting old. It feels like they could use some bats. So I could see them trading a pitcher for a bat. And they've also got Robbie Ray coming back from the injured list, by the way, at some point in the year. And they've got a pretty full rotation as it is. But I do think they should sort of stick with Castillo, Gilbert, Kirby as their top three. But then you've got question marks around Miller and Wu. Miller's got some exciting stuff, but he's a little bit all over the place still. Wu, I think a lot of people are interested in him because he's more of a more solid control kind of guy, maybe not an ace, but a solid 3, as a future. So I think he's the kind of guy I think they would be more apt to move. I could be totally wrong because Gilbert's value is so high and he's got 4 years of control, that, they could get a ton for him if they wanted to go that route. I wouldn't be surprised. I would be surprised if they did, because you usually don't see teams trading from like their core. And I feel like he's one of those. Like that's their core rotations, Castillo, Gilbert, and Kirby right now. And so, and what are you trying to do here? You're trying to win an World Series, and you've got Castillo here, and you've got some other big you got Julio's in his prime now. So you got, some pieces to work with to try to get there. So why would you trade one of those? Unless you feel strongly that you're going to get so much back, which you might, to fill some of those offensive holes. So I can see a case, but I'm squinting, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm leaning that way too. I think there's more of a chance you could see Miller or Wu get moved. One thing about Miller, and the Mariners know this, is he had some of the best stuff in Major League Baseball last year. When you go look at the Stuff Plus rankings on Fangraphs, when you go look at the pitching stuff bot, that the rankings they have as well, Miller was right up there, right? Sure, maybe the numbers weren't fully there for him, but they weren't bad necessarily. ERA and FIP in the fours. But, for a young guy that's 25 years old with a lot of control and not too crazy of a surplus, I think there's a good chance you could see Miller get moved. That's a price I could see a lot of teams willing to work with. A team like the Red Sox in my trade predictions video. None of my trade predictions are going to come true, by the way, but Bryce Miller to the Red Sox, I think would make a ton of sense, right? Looking at Breslow with how much he values the analytical side of pitching and seeing the stuff that he has and the amount of control that he has, a young guy that you can build with in that rotation. That's why I'm not necessarily sold on Burns. I would love to add him, but I'm not sold on him giving up prospects for Burns if it's going to be for 1 year. That's why I could see him maybe pivoting to someone like Miller, who could be, expendable. The trade that I came up with was at Cedame Rafaela, Luis Perales, maybe Wickelman Gonzalez, and then maybe you could even add Verdugo to it, a bat that could help them. Not necessarily a great bat that can help them now, but, something that you could add to your lineup. Maybe not the best trade I could have came up with, but whatever. Bryce Miller in a Red Sox uniform sounds pretty good if you ask me. But I think there's a lot of teams that would, especially when you saw how the stuff was last year, right? He's someone that you can work with, right? And you can build around, right? If you were to give a chance on, someone like Bryce Miller or Brian Wu getting moved, what % chance would you personally give?
Bryce Miller, I would say, is under 50. So here's the thing. He hasn't quite hit his prime. He hasn't quite established himself enough yet, and he's got electric stuff, but you don't quite know yet how dependable that is.
Sure.
And the error bars are all over the place with him. And so, if he establishes himself, with a solid year in this coming year, there's typically an arc where the value goes up because now your potential has kind of is played out a little bit. Now we know you can do it, and you've got 2 solid years. Now that's when you're at your peak value. And so it's like unripe fruit, right? He isn't quite ripened yet. So he's the kind of pitcher I think that would go up in value. So from the Mariners' point of view, you might be better off holding on to him, getting his contributions and seeing his value go up. That's kind of a win-win.
Yeah.
Wu, I think, is solid, but doesn't have quite as much upside. And so it's a slightly more, the error bars are smaller because he's a solid control guy. He's what you see is what you get. So his value will go up a little bit the more he sort of establishes, but you already kind of can see what kind of pitcher he is, and it's fine. You know what I mean? So that's a little bit more of a sure thing. So I think that the probability of him getting moved is slightly higher for those reasons.
Sure. Yeah, I think either one, honestly. Miller, I could see them wanting to hang on to a bit more, right? And then Wu, I could see, you know what? We got a top 3 already. We got Miller. Yeah, we can work something out with Wu, right? But before we kind of start wrapping this up, there is one more name I do want to talk about, and it is more the drama behind it that's a bit more interesting than anything. The downfall of Alek Manoah. It is crazy to see what has happened to this guy. Where you look at the years that he had in 21 in his rookie year, last year or 2 years ago in 22, almost getting to 200 innings, ERA in the low 2s, FIP in the low 3s, like great looking numbers, right? And this past year, everything just came off the rails, right? A lot of people were thinking maybe it was the pitch clock, maybe he just wasn't in the best shape, right, for the pitch clock, and maybe his mechanics were getting all out of whack, and he was just how it all kind of just came apart for him this year. Now there's some speculation that they could be open to moving him. If you go back, in the season, right, they sent him down to rookie ball. He ended up coming back, but then they wanted to send him back down to AAA, and he got annoyed about it. He went home, and he just disappeared. And if there was ever a time where it feels like you could have a change of scenery kind of a trade, I wonder if this could be it. And you got to think teams would love the chance to get Alek Manoah, to see if they can work with him and, get him right, because the upside is just through the roof. What are your thoughts on Alek Manoah? I mean, based off of everything that happened with the Blue Jays, do you think he ends up getting moved personally, or do you think maybe they work through it and they come to a resolution, and he's in spring training with the Blue Jays.
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack here. This is a really weird case
Yeah.
and an unusual one, right? And so first of all, I don't know what happened to Manoa. I've heard rumors that he was like overweight, out of shape, and
Mm.
could be other things as well. But just something wasn't right. And so there was a physical issue, but there was also kind of the sort of mental personality side, which you touched on, where he wasn't listening to his coaches and he was not getting along, and so now you got two red flags there. And then there's the fact that if Toronto is kind of floating his name out there saying, yeah, we'd be able to do it, you got to wonder, okay, his value has completely crashed, right? He used to be way up there, and now we got him at like 14. And that's just representing, well, he's a turnaround play, and he's got some upside, he's got some control if you can turn him around. But if they're willing to sell low on him, that low, you got to wonder from their point of view, is that smart? Like, or, in other words, are they communicating that to the market that, hey, we're done with this guy. He's a lost cause. We can't fix him. You take him. Like that's not smart either. That's not a good sign, right?
Yeah.
So, but on the other hand, yes, he's still got some positives, and he had that great year before that. Um, but I also know that the teams generally don't take kindly to guys who are not, show personality issues or are
Mm-hmm.
not quite getting along. So you can
Right.
say, yeah, he's a classic change of scenery candidate.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me to envision people spending too much capital on a guy who may just be a total bust at this point. And because there's a lot, the signs are more negative than positive, let's say, in
Yeah.
the balance of things.
Yeah.
So yes, he's got some upside if they can fix him, and if he works out, and then everybody gets along. But they're not going to pay an arm and a leg for that chance. So that's why we have his value is quite low.
We'll have to see. He's definitely
Yeah.
one of the more interesting trade candidates that we've seen in the last few
Yeah.
years, especially when it comes to more of the off the field kind of issues. So, who knows? You see a lot. I've seen a lot of Reds fans out there saying like, "Hey, I think maybe we could swing something." Right? There's a lot of
I
people
mean,
out
look,
there.
yeah. I mean, you could give a prospect-rich farm. The Reds have a lot of prospects, and trading one of them is not going to kill you. It's not going to make much of a dent. To get a guy who's a turnaround play, sure, I could see that.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting, but I'm excited. And before we wrap things up, I want to ask one simple question, right? If there is anything you could come up with for a prediction, right? If you were to come up with, or maybe even multiple, right? Where are you what do you think is going to happen? If you were to think one big trade that could happen this offseason, if there's anything, what do you think is the most likely? If you were to give one, maybe even a couple of predictions, what do you think?
Um, Burns is definitely my number one. He's going. There's to me, there's no question. That's a dead certainty. Um, I'm not 100% on Soto. I think there's some ifs and buts going on there. I think he's a strong possibility to be moved, but I'm not both Buster only saying it's 100%. But I'm not an insider either. I'm just a guy crunching numbers.
Yeah.
Cease, I do think is going to get moved as well because the White Sox are like, sure, we're open. So whatever, sure, good job. We just want to get a good deal and start over. I mentioned the Giants earlier. I do think they are a snake in the water. Snake in the grass.
Feel like it.
Because Zaidi has gotten the message from his owners that, hey, do something. Like, and I was listening to MLB Network Radio, and they were saying, if you go to a Giants game, what are the fans wearing on their backs? Is there a star player whose jersey they're wearing? There is none. You can't think of a star. Wilmer Flores was their best player. Like, they've got to get a star, right?
Yeah.
So
I like Logan Webb, but I don't know. So
yeah. So, and they just hired Bob Melvin, who, so they're like, that's the move you make if you want to try to compete. So they're going to be busy. I'm intrigued by the Braves filling their left field hole and their rotation out because Alex Anthopoulos is up to something. He just cleared house with a bunch of roster fringe guys, and now he's got the open spots, and now he's got some money to play with. So he's doing something. So, I don't want to make a out and out prediction. These are the tea leaves that I'm seeing. We're seeing a lot of teams that need to turn it around. The Yankees we talked about, the Cardinals we talked about, coming off of disappointing seasons that they're going to do something. The Giants are going to do something to break. So a lot of teams are going to be active. And we talked about how the free agent market is it's not it's not that much there. So I think, and because of some of the financial limitations that some of these teams are feeling, there's going to be more activity on the trade market. So whenever that happens, expect the unexpected, right? Like sometime maybe Luis Robert does get moved. Maybe I'm wrong that he's going to stay put.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
I'm going to touch on two of those things you just said. Where the White Sox coming in to this offseason, I'm thinking, you know what? I think they try to approach this offseason. They hang on to their core guys, right? You hang on to Robert. You hang on to Cease. Cease is the guy that you can build around in your rotation. Robert that's your star player. And you can just kind of maybe anyone else besides those guys are up for grabs. But when I heard that comment about him wanting to multiply players any way he can, that kind of said something to me. And
yeah,
because really, when you want to multiply the players, well, you
yeah,
just look at the high value players that you have, and
right,
obviously those are going to bring in pieces. And Cease more likely than Robert. Um,
yeah,
I hope we see it, honestly, because I love it. I love all the drama. I love it. But I'm definitely I'm warming more up to the idea that Cease is going to get moved. I think the Giants. My personal thing is the with the Giants. I feel like I think they're just better set up to sign guys. I'm not saying they're going to sign Ohtani. My free agent predictions, I had them getting both Bellinger and Chapman. All right, because I think they could use a center fielder. They could use that back. Chapman, they could use some better defense at third base, and maybe they
and
can
he's
get their
beloved in the Bay Area.
right. And Bob
So yeah,
Melvin,
yeah,
I could
right,
see them doing that.
yeah,
Instead of just going after, they've swung and missed going after the one big name. So
yeah,
how about instead of going after the one big name and like Ohtani, I mean, go for Bellinger, Chapman, who are on the lower
yeah,
tier, right? That to
yeah,
me would be I think because I don't think one player really fixes that team. I think
right,
you need to kind of add a couple of pieces there. So that's my personal thinking. I think they're just better set up financially to spend some money, right, and bring in two guys that are
yeah,
familiar with that organization. Chapman with not organization, but Chapman with Melvin, Bay Area, Bellinger playing with the Dodgers for all those years, right? So and they just need stars, and I think they got to
yeah,
attack it from different
yeah,
angles. Um,
yeah.
what do I
I think
know?
you make a. I think no. I think you make a great point. They've got rich ownership, and oh, by the way, with the A's moving to Vegas, they're the only team in the Bay Area, which
Mm,
is a huge, rich market. So now they've got and they're gonna. I'm an old A's fan, so I wouldn't convert to Giants myself, but I know people there who probably would, more casual fans. So they're gonna do just fine in terms of revenue and attendance, and they're gonna own that market, right? So
yeah.
they've got money to splash around.
Well, let's see if the speaking of the A's, let's see maybe let's see what the Las Vegas A's do in a few years once they've
Yeah,
settled in, to whenever that new ballpark opens up. And honestly, after all these years with the A's, I know that's it's a different story for a different day, but man, oh man, they better go make some moves when they get to Vegas. I think that'll cure a lot of people's
let's
unhappiness.
see.
If they just go make
Yeah,
some
right.
moves, good grief. Like, I think that'll cure everything. I don't know. That's a different
Yeah,
conversation for a different day.
right.
But John, thank you so much. It's always great talking. We're going to do a couple more of these this off season. The market, it's always flowing, right? So things are going to
Yep.
change. We're going to have some trades to recap at some point. But everyone, go check out baseballtradevalues.com. It is updated. It is just amazing. It's amazing. The one
Thank you.
thing that I love about the new site is when I remember telling you this, and you granted my wish, John, is on the simulator, when you go switch to a team, it doesn't scroll back up to the top anymore, and now it just goes directly. It's the dream come true.
There you
Oh my
go.
goodness. When I first did that, I was like, yes, you could have only just done that and I would have been happy. So anyway, I love
Well,
the
you're
site.
welcome.
Everything's great.
Thanks.
But everyone go check it out. Thank you for watching here for tonight, listening to my potato face and the master of the trade talking some trades here tonight. Everyone, if you can, on the way out, hit that like button for me. That always helps out with the algorithm, especially for the replay people. And subscribe if you are new. If you are new to the channel, think about joining the family here. We're talking baseball all the time. Hit the bell notification. That way you know I go live every single time. Share the show. And everyone, thank you for joining here tonight. And as always, we will talk to you next time.
Bye bye.